What's up, guys? Ian here, coach of your Ladner Lanturn, bringing you guys NCL Zebstrika Season 9. This is our draft analysis for this season. Let's have a chat. So, last season, Season 8, did not go that well for us. And in fact, the last 3 seasons really haven't gone that well for us. We've gone 6-6, I believe, in all 3 of them. And we've barely made playoffs in 2 of them and missed playoffs in 1 of them. So, something really needs to change. My performance in Gen 8 of NCL has been average, and that's about all you can say. I lost in 2 quarterfinals and didn't make playoffs once. So I would say that that's pretty darn average. I'm still kind of trying to just try new things, but I am on the verge of not really wanting to play the game very much anymore. So there are a few things that keep me sticking around. One is that I'm one of only 2 coaches to participate in every season so far. The other is that I just genuinely enjoy playing against my friends. And a lot of the league is my friends. I do run the league, so I put a lot of time and effort into making it a place that I enjoy, which helps me come back time and time again. And another thing is that we keep unbanning stuff, because I like to spice things up, and it helps that I want to try stuff more, especially with the usage-based tiers, which we'll talk about when I get to a couple of picks. But notable unbans and whatnot this season, the only new thing, so we unbanned Zamazenta Crowned, but we complexed it with no Howl and no Workup, so it has no way of boosting its attack at all, because it's forced to hold the Rusted Shield, which means it can't run like a Lychee Berry or anything like that, and it doesn't get any attack boosting moves outside of Workup or Howl. So no way to boost its attack, which is great, because it seems to make it less of a setup threat, and you can sort of prep more immediately for just like 4 attack sets, which is generally what you're going to see on Zamazenta Crown. So far, it's performed much better than that, so we'll sort of see. It's kind of the opposite of Protean Greninja, where Protean Greninja, immediately I was like, wow, this mon sucks. And Zamazenta Crowned, and I thinking the Protean Greninja was going to tear the league up. And Zamazenta Crowned has come in and torn the league up, and I thought, wow, this mon's going to suck. So, yeah, it can go either way. But, what else? Oh, Shaman Sky is allowed with no Seed Flare. I think it can Air Slash, but it's not allowed to Seed Flare. Or it's allowed Seed Flare and not allowed to Air Slash. I don't remember. It's not really relevant. Actually, maybe it will be relevant. Do we play Shaman Sky? It will be relevant in week 2. We play the Shaman Sky week 2. We actually play Zamazenta plus Shaman Sky in week 2. Where was I? I don't think we actually unbanned anything else in particular, but the usage movement took place, and a lot of stuff fell. People ended up voting in favor of dropping a lot of stuff from Tier 3 minus. So Tier 4 plus was just a plethora of great Pokemon that honestly just, it's not that much value, right? Like if you're thinking about it free points wise, you're only saving 10 points, okay? The big benefit that you have is that when you are trying to fill your required tiers, taking a Tier 3 mon essentially in Tier 4 means that you basically get 3 Tier 3s, right? So we'll talk about that, because I took one of the mons in Tier 4 Plus as my required Tier 4. I had plans to take a lot of others, but I just couldn't build a team around that. So one of the other things that has been a weakness of mine that I've quadrupled down on this season is a lack of bulk. So I'm sort of going with more bulky attackers in general and less on the straight bulk side, but this is something that I need to fix in general with my drafting, and it only kind of comes out that way because there's sort of a lack of it in the upper tiers, and I'm trying to find utility with my upper tier mons, because I find that if I get the utility with the lower tier mons, I'm just never being able to bring the utility. And I've gone through this a few times where my team sort of turned around after making transactions because I think that it improved it a lot, but we'll sort of see how this one goes. I don't think there's any other notes that I have I'm excited to take a little bit of a break from Standard after this season. We're going to take a longer break than the last time in anticipation of Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl coming out in November. I don't think that is going to change the metagame up at all, but this season is starting now in May and will be done, I think, in September. Early September, very early September, end of August, early September, this season will be done. And the games come out in November, presumably. So I was thinking about running another season 10, between November onwards, but with Legends Arceus coming out in February, I'm not sure that anything is going to change up the meta game enough that makes me want to do that. So at the moment, the plan seems to be to make Season 10 a Generation 6 league, which should change things up a little bit, going back to a Gen 6 meta where megas were not fake, but also where a lot of our mons just weren't as good in general, and the power creep was lower. So we'll sort of see what happens there. I am excited to go on that journey. Not affecting the usage tiers or anything like that. It's still a proper season, but it'll be not the same pretty much at all. So yeah, I'm gonna get to the point. You guys have been waiting this whole time to see what I picked. I think I got a bad pick. I got like a middle of the draft again. I got like 11th, I want to say. Pretty bad, honestly. Not the best pick, but I ended up just taking something that I wanted to try. Like, this probably would have lasted to round 2, and I had another thing in mind for round 2 that I wanted to take that I should have taken round 1 because it wasn't going to last me round 2, but I think the team ended up better without it in a sense as well. So I took Genesect round 1. It is limited. It is you're not allowed to run shift gear or you can't run shift gear or shift gear or items. You're forced into running a drive on it. So it's always limited to like the base 99 speed. You can never run like an Akaberry on it. Just shore up the fire weakness a little bit there, but I think it's fine. It's an amazing offensive breaker, to be honest. It's going to die a lot, but it's hopefully going to get a kill before dying in a lot of games. Yeah, download is really threatening, and it's a great mixed attacker. It's got great coverage on both sides, actually. Excuse me. So I'm a little bit excited to use this. I've always loved using regular Scissor, and this is just like a more offensive version of that, I guess, in a sense. So Genesect is the first add to our team. It was 160 points, so it's tier 1 minus, and then I was going to grab Mew in round 2, and it went on the wheel. But I'm going to go with a 200 point one anyways next. The main draw for me with Genesect is that it's like offensive momentum right away as well, but just the sheer breaking power that it offers, like, it's almost unwallable. You really have to have a fire type come in on it, and with our restrictions anyways, I can just run like Douse Drive, Technoblast. So it's pretty much unwallable. It reminds me a lot of the Nidos. And the Nidos is something that I also was looking at targeting, but I figured I didn't really want to like double up on that unwallable threat stuff with Genesect. So I didn't end up taking a Nido, spoiler alert, but I think the Genesect is a really great mon to sort of like build around. Granted, my fire resists aren't fantastic. I do have them, and that is going to be key as we go down the line here. So round 2, I actually took Landorus Incarnate, and then I ended up trading it away to Pokefan, who took Garchomp in the same round, because we kind of had like both wanted the other person's mon. So like after I took Lando I, he was like, oh no, Lando I wanted that. And I was like, okay. And then he took Garchomp, and I'm like, oh well, I should have taken Garchomp. Like, this was a mistake on my part not to take Garchomp. It offers me better utility. I mean, I know Lando I can defog, but I think Garchomp offers better utility. Besides the ground immunity with Genesect, it actually resists fire for Genesect, and it's a bulky enough mon that I can like reliably resist fire for Genesect. It's a much more reliable rocker than Lando because you don't have to be attacking every turn with Garchomp. And it's a physical threat to go with Genesect's presumably special threat, which, like, I didn't really want Genesect to fill like the physical role of things with Lando I, because Lando I is really more specially biased. So I think that Garchomp just made a lot more sense to pair with Genesect than Lando I, so I'm really happy that he agreed to that trade. Garchomp is what is on our team, and that's why it's on the side there. It costs 200 points. for either of them. So it was just a 1-for-1 trade. Both of them were 200 points. And I really like the direction that Garchomp takes me in. The one thing that I wish Garchomp had, and there's no way that it would ever get it, but like Flip Turn or something like that, momentum is something that Lando brings to pair with Genesect that Garchomp can't. But they both kill fires. They're both offensive grounds. They kill fires that threaten Genesect, and Genesect can pivot into Garchomp, resist the fire coverage, and then Garchomp can fire off a hit and kill the fire type most of the time. So I liked the synergy between them. Genesect also resists Garchomp's 4x weakness, just as Garchomp resists Genesect's 4x weakness. And Genesect resists Dragon. Genesect doesn't have the best bulk, right? But it can resist Dragon, Fairy, and the Ice for Garchomp. And Garchomp resists the Fire, which is Genesect's only weakness. So there's a lot of really good defensive synergy between them. The issue being they're both not defensive mons, right? So sort of got to shore that up a little bit. Heading into round 3, I wanted to grab some value and like speed because I wanted to draft a lot more bulk in this draft. And I sort of had an idea of what I wanted for my Mega, especially after trading for Garchomp, that eliminated like a ton of Megas on my list. Taking Genesect, I was like, okay, well, I'm not going to take Mega Scizor anymore. Mega Scizor was at the top of my list. And then taking Garchomp, I was like, okay, well, I'm not going to take Megazord X now, which was at the top of my list. So it brought me down to like my third, fourth options, and there were like 2 options, but I knew that I wanted one of them more than the other. And I sort of had to like scout out to see what Megas people were taking later on. All of that's pretty much relevant, but I'm not taking Zardex, and that's important because I'm taking a fire type now, which is Cinderace. This is not Libero this season. We did ban Libero on Cinderace, so this is Blaze Cinderace in Tier 3 Plus. It is 100 points. I actually think that this is fantastic value. I'm not going to lie. I think that Blaze Cinderace is probably worthy of Tier 2. I used to compare it to Darmanitan in a sense, because I was like, wow, it's just a fast offensive fire, but it is much faster than Darmanitan, offers a lot more utility to a team, and it can switch moves up, because Darmanitan, you're pretty much running Scarf. I mean, that's it. You're pretty much running Scarf. And Cinderace can still run Scarf, and outspeed a lot of the things that are going to try to outspeed Genesect or Garchomp. So I like that a lot. Garchomp also really doesn't like grass types or bug types. Now, Genesect can beat the grasses. It can beat the bugs pretty easily too. But Cinderace offers me more room there. There's some priority options with the Genesect and the Cinderace together, which I really liked the addition of. Court change being a big thing. It's not listed on my dock as removal because I just don't want to include all the coding necessary for that. I'm just too lazy to do that. But court change removal actually really helps a lot. If I don't want to run rocks on Garchomp, and my opponent's trying to set rocks because it's guaranteed chipped against my Genesect, or T-Spikes, which my team is actually incredibly weak to, then I can just court change them away, get them off my side of the field. I think on Blaze Cinderace, this makes a lot more sense than Libero Cinderace. Becoming a normal type doesn't really do any good for you on Libero Cinderace, but court changing away the hazards while you're still a fire type still lets you resist all the things that fire would. So it might be better on Libero if you're trying to court change in front of the hazard setter. That's one point where that would be a thing. But momentum, that's a big thing, and the speed. This is going to be the upper echelon of my speed tiers, and it's about where you'd want your upper echelon of the speed tiers to be, unless you're planning on drafting a Mega Beedrill, a Mega Aerodactyl. The base 130s aren't really that much of a problem this gen. It's pretty much only Koko that's an actual threat because Jolteon doesn't exist anymore. And like Weavile at 125, I mean, Cinderace is like pretty close to Torn-T, right? Like you'd probably want something a little bit higher than Torn-T, but Torn-T you can always like Scarf something to outrun or set up on it because you're not really going to see many Scarf Torn-Ts going around the world. With my 4th pick, I decided to pick up my Tier 2. This was a mon I really wanted just as a general blanket check to stuff. I think it's one of the best blanket checks in the game. I say this same sort of thing about Amoonguss a lot, but I think that Tangrowth is sort of in the same vein. It's 130 points, I believe, for Tangrowth. It was a Tier 2, just a regular Tier 2. It didn't get drafted last season, I think, so it dropped from like 140 to 130. just a bulky boy. And the good thing about Tangrowth comparatively to Amoonguss is that Tangrowth can break a lot more subs. It is a much better, well, A, move pool of attacking moves. B, it's a ground resist, which is fantastic. It's not a fire resist or an ice resist, so it doesn't really synergize super well with Genesect or Garchomp, but it's a ground resist for the Cinderace, which is great. And it's the best Thousand Arrows resist in the game, outside of maybe Tangela. It can break subs on things like Zygarde, because it's got a high enough attacking stat and a wide enough variety of moves that it's able to break subs against things. So it's not like a passive mon, like Alomomola is very, very, very passive. And you sort of find that a lot when you're bringing in a regen mon that you lose momentum, especially with like Aloe in particular. It's a momentum drain. But Tangrowth can break the subs. It's got the offensive pressure enough to do that. It's got the offensive pressure enough to be offensive if I really want it to be, but it's sort of like the cornerstone of my bulk, so it's probably not going to be offensive all that much. Defensive on both sides. Its special defense is lacking, but since Gen 6, you can really just slap an AV on this thing and call it a day. If you need it to be physically defensive, that's perfectly fine, and we'll see with my next pick, I sort of cover the special defensive side better, and that is with Slowking. Now, I had a lot of success once I dropped Empoleon for Slowking in NCL Season 7, NCL Season 7, when I had Liberos, Cinderace, and Darkrai. Slowking offered me a lot, pairing with Cinderace, because they can sort of just pivot into each other with Teleport and U-Turn. This is the same sort of idea, but Slowking just pairs really fantastic with Tangrowth. This is a great fire resist, by the way, for Genesect. It's a great ice resist for Garchomp, and for Tangrowth in the same vein. The biggest problem, like, I'm pretty weak to knockoff, right? So I'm pretty weak to bug types, I think, in particular at this point. Defensively, I'm weak to bug types defensively, not offensively. I can handle bugs fine offensively, but defensively, I'm pretty weak to bug types with the Slowking. So I'm going to sort of try and shore that up as we get to the end, because I had a better idea of what I want my Mega to be, and it's my Dark type. So we'll get to that later. But Slowking pairs fantastic with Tangrowth. They're both a great regen core together. I don't know about regen core. Like, it's sort of weird to call it a regen core, right? But they pivot into each other so effectively, and neither of them are passive enough to let subs be set up against them. Like, despite the speed, and this happens a lot with a lot of regen pairings, but despite the speed, they both have good enough offensive capabilities to be able to attack back and not get punished for just switching around between each other that often. But Slowking's main game changer is Teleport. Just slow momentum to tank a U-turn, tank a Volt Switch. It's weak to both of those, but tank a U-turn, tank a Volt Switch, tank a Flip Turn, and get the momentum back in your favor after they've already swapped. That's the big thing that Slowking offers. It also offers a Trick Room aspect to the team that is mostly irrelevant, but there are aspects to on my team. If I really wanted to, I could pull out the Trick Room strat. I've never really been a player known to play around Trick Room. I'm not even sure I've ever actually actively used that strategy in any game that I've played, and I think I'm nearing like 700 games played, something stupid like that. I'm nearing a ridiculous amount of games played in Draft League, and no, maybe it's more. I think I played like 5. I might be nearing or past 1,000 games played in Draft League. I think that's what it is. That must be it. That's quite ridiculous when I think about it that way. And anyways, I'm not sure that I've used Trick Room as a strategy, but Slowking is a Trick Room setter and abuser. Moving on. Next round, I went back to an old favorite of mine. Oh, Slowking was 90 points, Mimikyu 70. This is the tier 4 plus that I was talking about. Mimikyu in Gen 7 was by far my MVP. It still actually has the most kills of any Pokemon that I've ever drafted, with many less seasons than a lot of them. Just when I first started playing Draft League, I took Mimikyu in both of my first leagues. Something clicked with me with this Pokemon, especially when Disguise was better. Like, now you break Disguise, you take Life Orb Recoil from breaking Disguise, essentially, okay? But when Disguise didn't do that, and when Mimikyu had Z moves, this was like the cornerstone of so many of my drafts. Like, it was the best cleaner in the entire game last gen for me. And it's got like 114 kills, and I've taken it like 6, 7 times max out of 1,000 games. I could look up the stats right now. I might just actually look up the stats right now since I'm talking so highly about Mimikyu. I've only had it once this gen, and that sort of shows you how big the nerfs were, and the fact that it dropped all the way from 120 points to 70 at this point. 73 games played, by the way, for Mimikyu. 114 kills. It's averaging 1.5 kills per game, and I have 3 titles with it, including my last Gen 7 title in UTL. But yeah, I've only had this in one league so far, which is a free draft Galar-Dex. I dropped Aegislash for it. I found success with it over Aegislash. It ended up putting in a lot more work than Aegislash. I'm not a huge fan of Aegislash in Gen 8. It's not my kind of mon. I really prefer a steel type that can actually set rocks, which is ironic considering I have Genesect on my team. But Mimikyu, fantastic value, I think. I was never sure that it was worth the price of a tier 3. I think when it was 80, I would have considered it. This is the fairy on my team, so that's a little bit worrying, but it does handle dragons very effectively. And yeah, I think last gen I would have paid 120 points for this, no problem. I think I probably would have paid 140 points for this, no problem. I might not have touched it if it was a tier 1, but I think 140 points I would have found very reasonable. And the fact that it is cut in half and is 70 points and takes up a tier 4 slot instead of a tier 2 slot, I couldn't pass that up. So we'll see if there's any like nostalgia in Gen 7 gameplay going on here, but like Mimikyu, I mean, even if you check my YouTube channel, Mimikyu is part of the banner. Like, I got it commissioned as part of the banner because I just love this mon so much. So it's like bringing an old friend home, and I don't think I've ever actually taken it in NCL before. I don't believe that I have. Just verifying. Yeah, I've never had this Pokemon in NCL before. So this is the first, it's 9 seasons deep, and it's the first time I'm taking my favorite Pokemon in draft ever. It has a 14 kill lead over Zapdos still, and Zapdos has played 60 more games than it. And nothing else is even close. Nothing else is even close. It's like almost 40 kills ahead of Celesteela, which is in third. Or Garchomp, I guess I should say, which is in third. It's just got more passive kills. So, Mimikyu, MVP. I think Mimikyu is going to be an absolute MVP this season. It's still a fantastic cleaner. If I can fit it onto teams as a cleaner, I'm going to. That's pretty much all it comes down to. Round 7. Okay, this is where I take my electric. I took Thundurus-Therian. It's a tier 2. Is that it? It's just a tier 2? What's the points difference here? 250 to 120. It's a tier 2. It's just like Tangrowth. It's a tier 2. Thundy T. Last gen, I took Thundy T more than I should have, because I was like, oh, this thing's so great with double the NC move. It's still good, but not as good as last gen. I think Boots really helps Thundy T a lot, but it's an electric immunity, which is going to help with the Slowking. So now I'm not as weak to Volt Switch. I got Garchomp plus Thundy T. They are both weak to Ice, but Slowking handles that. Genesect handles that. It's more momentum. It's an electric type that has U-turn and Volt. I'm sorry, I spent way too much time on Mimikyu, so I'm sort of trying to speed it up. Both momentum on an electric type, which is great because now it's not walled by grounds. Big thing is the lack of Z moves, but it still has enough coverage that it's fine. It's a setup threat, which is great. So now I've got a billion setup threats with Mimikyu, Genesect, Garchomp, Thundy T, even Cinderace to an extent, Slowking to an extent with Nasty Plot. I needed an electric. My team was lacking a flying resist. It's not bulky enough to really be considered a flying resist, but it's also reliable removal, which I didn't really have. Cinderace Court Change is not as good as just Defog. So Defog from Thundy T is fantastic. I'm sort of bunching up the speed tiers a little bit here with Genesect, Thundy T, Garchomp. All I'm really missing is a base 100. At this point, I had decided I wasn't going for Zardex, but I was still like memeing about taking a Yard or an Xard at this point. Actually, I think Mike had already taken Mega Charizard X this round. But this was like the last big free point thing that I could spend, and this is also a very reliable water killer, which is something I didn't have, and I wasn't willing to go down to like Heliolisk to get. So I think this was the best electric that I could take. I actually still could have taken like a Zero Aura. I think Zero Aura was still on the table at this point, but I avoided that and went with 3 low tier mons as my next, or 3 tier 5 pluses to make the best use of that, because actually some stuff dropped from tier 4 minus into tier 5 plus as well. I think tier 4 plus and tier 5 plus looked phenomenal because of the usage tiers. We won't see that again next season because I think a few of them are going to move up naturally. But next I pick Kecleon. Kecleon's just the GOAT. I mean, it's won 7th man award for me, I think, twice now in the same league. Like, this is the 3rd, maybe the 4th time that I'm taking Kecleon in NCL. It's honestly just a great low tier value, especially as a rocker and a special wall. It's phenomenal in both of those roles. It's also another Trick Room setter / abuser, so there is a Trick Room mode. I've got Slowking, Mimikyu, Kecleon if I really wanted to. The main thing it brings me is a normal type because I was pretty weak to Ghost. So that's Kecleon. I don't know that I really need to touch on this all that much more. Protean is really amazing on Kecleon at least because it gets better coverage than Greninja. Except the U-turn. I wish that it had U-turn. Hitmonchan, more reliable removal. So Hitmonchan is a fantastic spinner, actually. It brings me a fighting type, which I didn't have. Not that I really needed one to beat Steels with Cinderace, Garchomp, and Genesect, honestly, because like you can just run Burn Drive Genesect and like melt through Steel types. But Hitmonchan, I think, is a great thing here. It's a great way to beat Dark types, which I was previously relying on like Genesect, Mimikyu for. So there's a lot of like type synergy going on with Hitmonchan. It's also specially defensive along with Kecleon and Slowking. So I think my special defense is pretty solid. I would say it's in a solid enough spot, but this is sort of what I'm talking about with like bulky offense. Garchomp and Hitmonchan are and Kecleon I should say, are sort of like the ideals for that. I'm not talking like Lando T, which I would say is part of bulky offense, but I think Hitmonchan contributes to that. The main thing that I got it for is Rapid Spin. I've used Hitmonchan before. I think it's very usable. It's got great coverage. It's got good abilities, and Rapid Spin makes it a lot better this gen. Just by boosting its speed outright, then I can get a hit off before I die, or by boosting my speed, I can get a Toxic off before I die, things like that. The last pick before my Mega was Aggron. So this is regular Aggron. Normally seen in tier 4 because this thing is an absolute monster with Rock Head Smash. Not taking any recoil from a base 150 power rock move is insane. If I wanted to, I could just run Wide Lens, Adamant Head Smash, and bop some people. Aggron, I think, is actually a phenomenal offensive rock type. It's also a really good low tier Steel. And it gives me more rocks, which I was sort of missing out on. I've got the Kecleon, the Garchomp, and the Aggron. My Mega's not going to give me any rocks, so it's good enough rockers that I don't have to bring rocks on Garchomp every week. I can have a Kecleon, I can have an Aggron. It's a Fairy Resist, which is great. It's Fire Neutral. It is Ground Weak, but I think I've got good enough ground answers that it doesn't have to be a problem. And yeah, I just liked Aggron as like a low tier offensive breaker. I think it's probably the best offensive breaker that I absolutely could have found in tier 5+, and it's just a fantastic mon. Not much really to say about Aggron in terms of that. I've used Mega Aggron a couple of times. Mega Aggron is not nearly the threat that regular Aggron is, despite having the increased like stats and stuff like that. Just losing the rock type and losing Rockhead Head Smash is insane. The combination of Rockhead plus Head Smash is just nuts. Rock decimates so many types. It's such a good offensive typing. Yeah, there's not really much more to say about that. I think the biggest thing that you'd want to resist Rock is other Steels, which we've gone through. I can easily beat Steels, and Grounds, which I'm not as confident in, but I can at least defensively check Grounds very easily. So, last but not least, here is my Mega. I had 0 points left, so I went with the Mega Tier 1 Mega Gyarados. Mega Tier 2 Mega Gyarados. Mega Tier 1 costs 40 points, so I couldn't take anything from that, but I wanted to grab a Dark, and Mega Gyarados sort of helps me beat those grounds. This sort of falls in line with like double water, which I think is fantastic this gen, having a defensive water and an offensive water. I've used my Gyarados only once, and I adored using it. I thought it was so much fun. There's a lot of variety that you can do with the sets because it's bulky offense. It's very good, especially defensively. It's got a great HP stat. It's not the best defensively, and the speed tier is not exactly where you'd want it to be, but it's in sort of a range where I can get a Dragon Dance off and win games. And that's what I really like about Gyarados. There's enough momentum for me to just get Gyarados in on walls and break them. Maybe help for Mimikyu clean or a Genesect clean later on into the game. And just overall, I think Gyarados is like invaluable. The one weakness that it has this gen compared to last gen, and I find this a lot with Megas, is it's like weak to rocks coming in. And that's not different because it was still weak to rocks before it Mega Evolved. But this gen with Boots running around so much, you notice it more. Like, it's not like the Zards where you're like, okay, well, I need to get rocks up for the Zards, because you're never like, oh, well, I need to get rocks up for the Gyarados, unless you absolutely had a calc where you could, like, play the mind game and click an electric move, and it did 74%. And it's like, oh, well, this Gyarados is 75% after coming on rocks, so I guess I'm screwed. That just wasn't, like, a scenario, you know? So I think Gyarados rounds out the team a little bit better. It makes me less weak to Psychic. Not that I was really that weak to Psychic overall. I have good enough Psychic killers. Just a fail-safe so that something like an Necrozma can't just store power through my team. And that is the team. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. I think it's an okay enough team. I'm sure there's some improvements that I could make along the way, but I don't see any right away. Otherwise, I would have drafted them. And I'm looking forward to week 1. Next week, in week 1, we're taking on our good pal Cade in the Irvine and Infernape. This is a rematch from Season 1 Finals, so throwback all the way to 2018, where we played Cade in Finals in Season 1. And he's actually got a couple of Mons from that team, so it should be a little bit exciting. I don't have any Mons from my Season 1 team on my roster, but he's got a couple, and we'll sort of... Actually, he's got one of mine on his team from that Season 1 roster, but we'll see how it goes. I'm not looking too optimistically at it. It's a bit of a weird matchup, but I'll get into that in the team builder. So hopefully you guys enjoyed, and I'll catch you guys for week 1 against Cade and the Irvine Infernapes.